Well, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for sticking around for this session late in the afternoon. We have a very interesting panel here with us, so it's good that you have stayed. I'm going to start with Tiago Pitucunha here, who's currently a senior advisor for marine policy to the president of Portugal. And he was a key player at promoting the blue economy at European level, so very nice to have him here too. We have Nuno Coelho, he's CEO of A4F, that's a Portuguese company producing microalgae for nutrition and cosmetics. Miguel Marques, who is a top economist for blue economy at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Kelvin Okamoto, the CEO of Gen3 Bio, that develops algae for bioplastics in the US. Finally, thank you James for sticking around, I do know you have a plane next. James Levine, he's the CEO of Sapphire Energy for the US and produces crude oil, or pretends to, will do, from algae biomass. If I'll start with Tiago, when I started to prepare for this session, which is called Biomarine Economics, the first thing I thought was, what exactly is that? How do we define that? What are we talking about exactly?
That's right. I think that one of the most important things to do is to start by trying to define which biomarine market are we referring to. If one looks into the investment banks' reports on maritime and marine economy, they define blue biotech as a sector that is somehow smaller than the market that we are talking about when we consider the business convention of biomarine. Namely, a lot of what we are discussing here and are doing business about in here on technology for aquaculture normally goes into the aquaculture sector and not to a blue biotech sector. So it is important to understand. And so, of course, when you look into the reality of the figures in those reports, the figures are somehow smaller than I think that they really are if we think of a broader market like we think here. So the figures that are now currently expressed are 5 billion euros for the blue biotech market. It's quite a small figure compared with the overall biotech market, but of course blue biotech is also only a part and not a large part of the biotech market in general. What I think that is really important is to look at the trends, to understand where we're heading, because the difference between those figures and the trends are quite immense. If we look at the trends, we understand that everything is pushing this industry to develop, to expand, to gain scale. First of all, of course, we have this demand for a bioeconomy that we want to be based on natural capital. And natural capital, of course, about ecosystem services. So I would say as well that the economics of the biomarine resources are the economics of marine ecosystem services. We are, in fact, in a way, going back to a capital that is still pretty much to be used, to be developed. And then, of course, we have the global trends that push for this industry. We have the global demand for food, for healthy products, for biomedicine, for supplements, food supplements and nutrients. We have a demand for sustainable energy, for biofuels. So there is an economic demand, in fact, for this industry. But it's not only that demand that matters. There is also an environmental demand, the environmental protection demand that was also referred here before. We know that we need to change our ways of exploiting the planet's natural resources. We know that we have to do it differently. We need to find new resources and apply them in different applications. So of course that we need that with this industry, we are not going to exploit the ocean bioresources through bottom trawling. We will replicate a lot of what we do in our labs. And this is also very important, environmental reasons. I would say that, just to finish, that if one thinks that the number of manufactured goods that will have a biotech component in the future, and people speak about over 50% of all manufactured goods, it's enough for us to understand the potential of what we are talking about.
Thank you, Tiago. I think you made some very interesting points there. We have 3 companies here with us that are working with microalgae, with algae, which is a part of this huge biotech industry. And I came across this quote from Matt Carr, who's the executive director of the Algae Biomass Organization, and he said, and this is going back to an Apple famous slogan that we know, there's an algae for that. And I think that's an interesting way of coming to this topic, because yes, there's an algae for a lot of things, but how do you match that with relevant demand and products that actually have a market? And that was my question. Now I'd like to start with Nuno with this question from A4F, because I think you have become a relevant player in this field, in algae production, microalgae production, and you created a brand, Alma, to reach out to consumers and to make your technology more known and more known to the market. Is that a way to go forward, survive, and beat the competition in this industry that moves so fast?
Yes, I think we can say yes. I mean, we are in the market for quite a long time, and we have been successful. As some of you might know already, we have just, not long time ago, we have commissioned here in Portugal the largest unit in the world to produce microalgae on photobioreactors. It's located more or less 100 kilometers here from Lisbon, and we have been able to prove that it's possible to put in place such a unit and to sell the products that we are producing there on a sustainable way. So I guess it's proven. It was proven here in Portugal, and I think we can say we are a success case on that. The way we did it was the first thing, as I just said this morning on a pitching session, if I would have to choose one word for that, what we have done, it would be experience. We did that based on many, many years of experience of producing microalgae. So we consider ourselves as a company that has relevant experience on that, and that allow us to put in place what I've just said. This is not an easy market. It's not easy to produce microalgae, but I always remember a phrase from a previous Minister of Economics from Portugal, Professor Daniel Bessa, whom we liked a lot. He's also chairman of, General Director from Cotec. And he said, make no mistake, it's much easier to produce than to sell. So we have been able to put in place this unit. The unit is up and running and producing, but we still face challenges on selling. For that, we have put in place another company. You all have heard of that. It's called Alma. You were able to taste some of the products that we have developed yesterday, and we'll go on this path to develop new products, to add value, and to try to make this a sustainable business. It's not yet sustainable, but we are pretty much there, and I'm pretty confident that we'll get there soon. We did this our way. It is absolutely different from our friends and competitors from US have done. We did this with very limited resources, but again, based above all on our experience. And I used to say to my team many times, a project like this would be hard to do in a different country from Portugal, because actually it involved many things that Portuguese are very good at, like creativity and solving problems, mindset and whatever. This is one of the reasons I think we were successful. So for those of you who are here and are Portuguese, sometimes we say that Portuguese are different people and not easy to handle. I would say exactly the opposite. I think actually it was because we are Portuguese that we were able to put in place such a complex process. Just to give you an idea, I think I've mentioned this a few times. This unit that we put in place, we had to design it from scratch. We designed it almost every screw of it. There are no equipments for this type of units. So it was an engineering challenge. It was a management challenge. It was also a biologist, a challenge from the biology point of view. I could stay here, speak for this for half an hour, but I would maybe let my partners tell you about their experiences.
I'm going to grab something you said there, and it's very fortunate that we have a US competitor here to comment a bit on what you've been saying. James was just recently appointed CEO of Sapphire Energy, and we do know that algae biofuels are perhaps the industry's most talked about business, and with the interest with investors, public funds, but there is still a long way to go there. I do know that you do want to expand in products beyond biofuels and generate product revenue there, which is interesting, but also a challenge. And I would like you, if you could, to explain to us what kind of products you would come up with and when in the near future.
Well, sure. To build on where you started, maybe to start with the first comment, I don't believe that actually I do sit amongst competitors. This is an early stage industry. And as I've had the opportunity to speak with many people over the last couple of days, I think there are more opportunities if we work together than if we think somehow we'll succeed on our own. So amongst us, I think there are many different models and approaches, and that will lead us to different products. And that's what gets to your question. From a process perspective, at Sapphire, we think about ourselves as microalgae farmers in outdoor ponds. That means that we're able to produce products at extremely low cost, but it also means that we need to target products that have the right profile and the right purity specifications that are going to be successful within our approach to manufacturing. And that may look very different from what you would do in a photobioreactor. It's not to say that there's a right way and a wrong way, it's just there are certain products that are going to be successful in one that may not be successful in the other. If anything, building on what Nuno was just saying, we look for simplicity and more simplicity. So as our technology evolves and as we invest in our technology, it will almost get to the point where you may think that if you're looking at a production site, it's a lake, or it's effectively a rice paddy, because you will see almost nothing that looks like a manufacturing facility. But for us, that means you will also see something that is extremely low cost biomass production. So within that context of where we are focused, we see that, yes, there are opportunities to create what I might refer to as higher value products within that production platform. But I think if you're in the photobioreactor business, you might view those as lower value products relative to how you target your spaces. But we do think that as our model evolves, the ability to price protein competitive with what you can do and pull it out of the ocean for is absolutely a viable process. Sapphire started and has been around for 7 years developing technology to create inexpensive biomass to then convert, using a hydrothermal liquefaction process, into crude. And we may in fact commercialize that technology, but it will be in areas where there's a strategic view of fuel, such as the partnership that we have with China. But along the way of developing that technology, we had to focus on cost, because expensive biomass was, in our mind, never likely to be competitive with fuel without subsidy, and that was our target. And so in coming on board earlier this year, my focus is saying if we can produce low-cost biomass, to whom do we want to sell that biomass? And I agree and heard Matt make the comment you said there's an analogy for that, to use the wrong plural. But I think the focus needs to be, and you're going to hear it from, I think, everyone on this panel that's in manufacturing and in the room, frankly, that we need to pick which algae it's going to be. We need to look at what is the product, who are the customers, where are we manufacturing it, how are we pricing it, and how are we going to create a business that's sustainable from that process. And I think that for leaders at a certain stage in technology development, that becomes the challenge, and certainly that's what I see my future at Sapphire to be.
Thank you for that. I think that was an excellent summary. I think you did notice that I had a little slip of the tongue at the beginning when I introduced you. I do know you don't pretend to produce biofuel, but I would like to just ask a follow-up question to you, because I'm worried that you need to go and leave earlier. Is biofuel going to ever be there? Will Sapphire Energy in a few years be called something else, and will you be producing something else?
To your question, I'll give you the ambiguous response of a technology developer: yes. Biofuels, I think, will be successful. I think the demand is there. I just don't think that we're going to see biofuels successfully launched initially, or biofuels from algae launched successfully initially in markets where it's treated as purely a commodity. there are ways to value biofuels or a domestic source of transportation fuel over and above its pure energy content, and the optionality that you create by having your own domestic source of transportation fuel, there's ways to value it over and above its energy content. I think it's unlikely to be successful perhaps in the US initially because of what's happened with fracking over the last 5 years and the revolution that's happened in the US domestic energy industry, but that to me is very different from saying therefore that makes it globally unsuccessful or unable to achieve success or a cost point that makes it relevant for the energy mix over the course of the next 20 or 30 years. It won't be in the next 2 or 3 years, but certainly with a longer term horizon, I think it does have a role to play in an energy mix.
Thank you. Kelvin, I'd like to move to you if possible now. Marine bioplastic, and this is one of the statistics that we have in the brochure for the BioMarine conference that I really like, is less than 1% of the total biomaterial market so far. So it's still in very early stages. And we talked a bit about how to get people involved and investing and funding. So how can you advance this? How do you bring in investors to your specific industry?
Thank you. The bioplastics industry in total, not just for marine, is less than 1% of the actually almost less than 0.1% of the total petroleum-based plastics industry. And that's even those that are produced from cornstarch and sugarcane and so on, which everybody is much more familiar with. Based on marine, there's actually almost nothing today. How do we get that going? Excellent question. Gen 3 Bio is a new company. We're new this year, that we're working on technology that we've started working with last year. It does take time to get the refinances and so on. And honestly, one of the things that we have found out through individuals that are trying to raise the investment funds is that there's very little actually truly available and very little interest in this particular industry because of the time it takes to actually grow it, build it up, and so on. We have recently had to change our direction, and some of the other companies have done this similarly, is that we are actually looking at doing small-scale public stock issuance. And we have to figure out how we're going to do that, when we're going to do that, how we're going to do that, and at what level. Just because what we don't want to do is a number of companies here, I've talked to a number of individuals who have had startup companies here, is it takes them 4 or 5 years in many cases to actually find the investment to get going. Well, when you're working with patented technologies or patent applied technologies and so on, you don't get that time. You have to work as quickly as you can. Now, the other part to go with that is that you also then want to work with as many different companies as you can. We each have a focus, and we're not especially competitors. We're not competitors, but we each have a focus, and we can all help each other build the businesses faster, build the bioeconomy faster, and each get us to understand and use each other's expertise to actually build the business faster and to do the development faster and go through scales.
Thank you. I think Nuno might be able to help here how to do this without investment and how to grow a company and be relevant as a player in microalgae production without investment. How do you do that?
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. To start with, there's a completely different mindset from Europe to the US. I think this is clear for almost everybody in the room. Some years ago, I met in the US someone that he was the founder of Google. He was on the early stages of funding Google. And what he said was something really nice. So those words are not mine. I've just heard them, and I'll try to be as accurate as possible. And he said to me something like this, really we Americans have somehow a different way of doing things. We just throw money into it, and we know that something will come out of it. Some of us will lose money, but some of us will earn huge amounts of money. This was a kind of Google initial funding mindset. And he continued saying, you know, Europeans, on the other hand, you just put a little bit amount of money and you hope that something will come out of that. If nothing comes out of that, you'll put a little extra amount of money and wait for something to come up. And at the end, something will come up. In the US, this process might take you a few years. In Europe, this process might take you a decade. What he didn't tell me about was the balance between the amount of money Americans would put into it and take out of that, and what is the amount of money the Europeans would have to put into it and take out of that. So A4F, on the other hand, did things neither the American way nor the European way. We did it the Portuguese way. To be completely honest, that was the only way we could find to do that. We didn't want, that was absolutely clear for us. We didn't want to have venture capitalists at the company from the beginning. This is absolutely clear. I will try to say this in a nice way. The reason for this was that it was clear for us at the time, and still somehow clear with a very, very few exceptions, that many times venture capitalists do not know enough about the business to invest on that. And they are convinced that finance know-how is enough to invest on a company. My personal experience and the company's experience so far tells me this is not right. You have to really know deep the business in order to invest on that and to add value. So this is the reason why we didn't want venture capitalists from the beginning, neither from the US, neither from Europe or even Portugal. So we have to find a way, and we did find a way. We found some customers that actually now are our partners, and they were willing to find a way to finance the project, either with public funds, either with European funding for research and development, and also with our effort. We did our part on that business. So we found a way to put in place this very, very big unit without any extra money, without any extra help, but our own funding. If you ask me if I'll do it again, of course, I'll try to do that again. But somehow it had to do with the options we had, and the options were not much. We were not desperate. We knew exactly what we needed and exactly what we wanted, so we fixed and were stuck to it, and we succeed.
Would you ever consider an IPO, as Calvin is now considering?
We actually look at all the options we have. Let me try to say this in a nice way again. Venture capitalists somehow think that they are the only ones who know about IPOs, about bank loans, about money. That is not true. The assumption that you know more about these things than the others sometimes leads you to huge mistakes. And it's a mindset that we are not very, we don't deal that well with this type of mindset. So answering your questions, we are really looking at all the options possible. But if we ever go to an IPO, it will have to do with the right conditions. And again, staying a little bit with our history so far, we are not the type of company who would go on an IPO saying that we would like to do this and that, and let's try to raise some money to do some dreams, and we would like to do that. If we ever go that way, it will be for something that it's already done or it's proven to be feasible, instead of selling some dreams like some companies in the US did, not recently, but some years ago. It's amazing what the American company can do on an IPO. I personally don't feel that comfort about that because, well, for many different reasons. I would have to let someone else talk because otherwise Tiago would keep on telling me to shut up.
No, I'd say the simple answer is no.
Yes. Yes, it's no.
I'd like to go a bit with a broader picture again now with Miguel. We've talked a lot about algae and microalgae here now. But if we go more broadly, and Miguel, where would you see the most relevant openings and the opportunities here? Tiago started a bit about what we could think about biomarine economics, but where are the openings for business? Where can you actually be relevant?
Thank you, Annabella. Well, I like to put these kind of questions in the beginning, and in my comprehension of the beginning is the demand side, or the consumers, or even the users. Because in this kind of industries or sectors, what is important is to find a kind of a lighthouse, because there are some words that we hear today that is start, early stage, and so on, in the search of a direction, okay? And that direction must come from consumers and users. So, and to answer to your question, so if we focus on the type of consumer we want, if it is a final consumer or if it is to solve a problem, and in that area I enjoy more talk about blue biotech solutions than products. So with that we can find the opportunities. So in the previous, and I have to congratulate the organizers, because it's not common to see some retailers speak, so and they represent the consumers, but are other areas that are the productions, and as you know there are more and more regulation about environment and so, and blue biotech solutions can help on that. So in the field of human feed or animal feed, or in the field of cosmetics, for instance, even in energy that we talk here about, and plastics that are good examples, you can find the main opportunities. And how to serve these needs are in a step-by-step approach, the key, in my opinion, to success in a kind of difficult area of starting. So I don't know if I answer completely to your question, but these three main areas of feeding people or animals, or energy, or even other areas linked with cosmetic, healthcare are the key opportunities for this sector. But again, you must match with a detailed consumer or user need. If you only stay with the technology part or the supply side, you will struggle.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. And I'll come back to Tiago with, I think that a lot of the challenges that we see here, of course, in a very different aspect, but a lot of the challenges are the ones that you also see in other technological startups and IT, in the IT industry. I know that you sometimes compare the two to see how we can have growth here in this industry also. How do we do that? How do we get the same kind of growth that the IT industry has today, and what has not been done yet?
Okay, thanks. I think that IT is probably 10 years in advance to this industry, in a way. I think that IT has very much captured the long-term visions of states, of governments, which have also channeled the public resources at an early stage to the industry. And of course, IT, as we know, also totally dominates the lives that we have today, that we live today. And you have the biggest companies in the world within the IT sector. So the IT sector, which is a sector probably with 20 years, 25 years, it's a dominating sector of our economic existence, so to say. Of course that there is still a lot that needs to be done for the bioeconomy to reach that kind of global level and scale. What I like to compare, it's because I think that in many ways they are heading into the same direction, in as much as that they are a solution. When we look into this sector, is this a solution for our needs? Well, if we think about what it's the circular economy that we will have to develop, the paradigm of sustainable development of this century, no doubt that I find a lot of answers in this sector, and also a lot of advantages that are in the IT sector. such as the high knowledge content, the technology, the possibility of scaling it up, the multiplier factor, the added value that you take out of it. So in Europe, we developed, as you know, the Lisbon strategy, which is now the European 2020 strategy, the Europe 2020 strategy for a society of information and knowledge. This was our goal. And it was very much also a way to have we managed in Europe to make this goal concrete. I think that we've managed to do that with ITs, but not yet with this. So I think that this also goes into our paradigm of the policy that we want to develop to be in accordance with a circular economy, a bioeconomy, a sustainable development economy.
Yes.
Can I just add something?
Please.
Maybe here I can add something of value. I worked for 15 years on telecom business. I have done in my life one of the most challenging things you can imagine, which is launching from scratch a telecom operator. I did it twice. Somehow those 15 years prepare me for algae, because this is hugely more difficult to produce algae than to be in IT or telecom, whatever you mentioned. Believe me, I know this for sure. The point here is that we are dealing with living organisms. You can have, does any one of you have the slight idea what is the most difficult thing on IT business? Can you raise your hand, please? Okay, I'll tell you, it's billing. Billing. Being able to invoice your customer. The billing system is the most challenging and difficult thing on a telecom company. This has nothing to do with biotech. Biotech is much more difficult because you're dealing with living organisms. So on one side, you have challenges, whatever you want, technological, software development, you name it. But dealing with living organisms, it is much more difficult, believe me.
I do believe you. I also...
Thank you.
We agree on that. I also agree that in terms of cost, it is much higher.
The cost
producing algae, microalgae, microorganisms that are living organisms than in an IT company.
Unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer for that, because on IT you have suppliers that really charge you a lot. So the cost of launching a telecom company or IT company can be absolutely astronomical. But the technical difficulties, I don't know if I made myself clear, the technical difficulties of biotech are, I would say, many times higher because of living organisms again.
I'd like to go to Calvin with this, just to follow up on this on cost and how to produce the algae, and also if you could expand a bit on something that we discussed earlier, which is demand and high-end products and the gap between high-end products, low volume, and big volume and lower-end products.
And actually, thank you, Annabella, but I'd like to also go back to what Nuno was saying, is the IT industry is a great model for us over the long run, is how the algae or the biomarine business can grow, or the blue technology business can grow. Unfortunately, that industry has also done a couple things that made it more difficult for this industry to also get investment and funding, is because in the IT industry, individuals anticipate getting returns extremely quickly. You do software, you're out in 6 months, you grow or you die. Here, you're very lucky to get out in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road. The other thing is that the IT industry, when you're dealing with software or some of the hardware, you're not dealing with a lot of capital requirements, which also can be very difficult to deal with. So the IT industry is a great model for how we can grow as an industry, but in terms of how investors look at it, it actually is a completely different model, unfortunately. Now, in terms of costs, all the different algae cultivators have different models. You know, they'd use different microalgae, macroalgae, seaweeds, etc. And for them to grow and for them to have capital to keep going, most of them have to focus on the high-end, high-value goods. And beyond that, those are also tend to be the low-volume type items. But that's how they can get the money to raise to grow their volumes. Unfortunately, if we're looking at the large volume businesses, which usually have competitors in it already, say petroleum, plastics, etc., there's already a bar there, and it's usually pretty low. And so what we have to do is we have to find a way to breach between the high value, low volume, and the lower cost, high volume businesses, and find a way that we can somehow get that done with cultivators to make that happen. Now, one of the things we've talked about is that there's got to be collaboration between different businesses that have different focus or different foci for taking different cuts of the fractions from algae and each using their part to lower the cost for everybody else that takes fractions from that same extraction and so on. I don't know whether I got all your questions there, Annabelle.
Yeah, you did. I'd like James maybe to comment a bit on this and expand if you can.
I think I'd pick up really where you left off and say that I think in some ways there is a need to understand whether in producing algae we're looking at a purified product that we're trying to sell or if we're looking at whole algae. And there's an opportunity then to think about different fractions. There's the opportunity to think about algae effectively as a biorefinery. And then the question comes down to, is it economic to extract each product and try to purify each component to sell on its own? Or are we better off not going through that process and trying to achieve an overall whole value for a whole algae product that's able to be economic? But I think that's about starting in the right place, which I agree is also at the end. Who's buying it and what are they buying? What value does it create for them? How does it differentiate from other products that are on the market? Then, as a technology company, you work out how your technology can satisfy that demand economically. And that's the process, certainly, that as a technology company, we are going through. I think that it may be true some companies attack that on the first day of their existence. Other companies may attack that long after their first plan is starting to falter and they say, what do we have here? I think that's the nature of technology development. And in some ways, to think about the approach to technology development, I'll go between Europe and the US to the UK, where I had the chance to live for 10 years, and say there's a great expression, horses for courses. And there are some processes that you will only develop by taking that giant 6-foot leap across a stream, and there are some processes that you can walk slowly across the stream to achieve. And that's really what each company has to decide. What's our target, what's our technology, and what's our tolerance for not quite making it where we thought we were setting out to go.
Do you think, though, that in the long run you still have the same investors and the same funding from the people that believe that, you know, from the start biofuel would be the next big thing, when that is not the case and when in a few years' time you'll be producing other products?
I don't think that's actually a goal. So I would almost answer your question by saying I hope not. The investors that come in and provide the seed capital for a company are not the investors who should be there long through the process. And I think that what you need to understand is that you shouldn't be driven in your investor choice by the availability of capital. You need to think about what is right for the company, what is the right set of investors for the company. There are many public companies today that should be public. There may be some public companies today that should not. But I think that overall it comes down to do I understand my business well enough to know who should fund it? And there's the concept of a capital structure. There's a lot of different options for who sits within the capital of a business, and as a new technology company you have even more options than typical. And you have to understand what your business is. Then you can decide who's the right person to provide capital for that business. You can get ahead of yourself by just taking the capital that's available and saying, I'll figure out a way to make this work. But that's about thoughtful financing of an overall business plan.
Thank you. I think we're going back to we need to focus on the client. and for that I go back to you, Nuno, if I may, focusing the company and the development of a technology on what you can actually do and who is going to be there to buy it, and focusing your company on the client and the client's needs.
Again, I think it was clear for us that selling dry biomass would create us sooner than later a problem of pricing. So again, we didn't have much choices. So either we could develop some products that could add some value to the biomass, or just selling biomass would create us a problem, as I told you. As I mentioned, I hope some of you have tasted either the ice creams or the other products we had here today. But this is one of the reasons why we have created Alma as a company, a completely separate company, because it has to focus on different things that we focus either on technology development or on algae production. So it is absolutely clear for us that the potential of microalgae is absolutely huge. I think few of us, if any, on this room can have a clear idea on what is the potential of algae. Microalgae will play a decisive role on our future. We have no doubt whatsoever on this. But we are kind of a chicken and egg problem. We don't have microalgae production in quantities that can bring the price lower, but we have to have finance to keep on developing the technology. And so this is the reason why it was clear for us that we had to develop products, and we'll keep on doing that in the future, no doubt whatsoever. We have partnerships with very interesting companies, some of them you have heard of in this BioMarine, but we'll soon develop other partnerships for other stuff. If, as it says there on Alma's publicity, a tablespoon of algae is equivalent to 90 grams of spinach, then you can easily predict that it can solve problems that people face on a daily basis, like giving spinach to kids and so on, that have huge potential on the market. So we'll go for it, and definitely we will develop those type of products.
Miguel, if you would have to advise a Portuguese company that, or a Portuguese investor that is listening to us, where would they start in this industry? Where would you advise them to start? How can a Portuguese company here, for example, step into this industry and take a piece of it?
Well, being coherent with my first talk, I think if you are in a market, or if you are doing something that already has a strong market, for instance, in the field of feed, human or animal, like additives or so, you have a range of possibilities of finding financing from traditional sources, venture capital and others. The issue is if you do not have found yet that market, and maybe one advice I can do is try to find probably a solution for need for a mainstream producer from whatever. Because sometimes they have needs that are related with environment, and also they have some waste, but it's not waste, can be energy for your production, can be other things, and if you find that match, maybe you can find you some money that can invest you to discover a product or a solution that then, when it's discovered, you can increase the range of possibilities of financing. So the key advice I would give is try to find the need you want to solve, and if you didn't find yet, please try to find a mainstream company that wants to solve a situation that does not exist yet, the solution in the market, to help you in this early stage to finance you to find that solution.
Thank you. Again, I think focus on what are the exactly needs and the demand. I'd like to ask a question to all of you with a slight difference to Tiago and Miguel. Where do you see your company in the next 5 years? And for Tiago and Miguel, where do you see this industry, or where would you like to see this industry in the next 5 years? Let's start with Tiago.
Thank you very much. I think that it's amazing the momentum that this industry is gaining also in the last years. I think that you know, the economic crisis that we had also pretty much, at least in the Western Hemisphere of the planet, makes people need to think on new ideas, new avenues for growth, new solutions. And in a way, of course, you can also resent the fact that capital is less available. Some people will contest that. I think that the fact is that people are more open to more ideas, to new ideas. And this, I think, is the best thing, the best ally of this area, of this industry. And I really do think that the momentum that is being developed, and that has been developed, if we think about this industry 5 years ago, we wouldn't imagine that we would be here, I would say. I think that in 5 years, we will be also on a much higher developed stage, and that this is it's a trend, as I said, and it's not going backwards. So, you know, we can say that shale gas probably questions biofuels, but at the same time in Europe we have a political mandatory policy. We have to have 10% of biofuels in the transport sector by 2020, and shale gas can change the whole energy landscape in the world on geopolitical terms, but it's not going to change that, and it's not going to change the sustainable development paradigm, and that companies that are within that paradigm will succeed. And therefore, I mean that green economy and green growth will be unavoidable. And this is the hope I have.
In my view, that is, it's difficult to answer in considering all the industry. I think we should divide in slices the industry. So there is part of the industry that is ahead, so and related with feed, and that will rise faster than the others. In the opposite side, we have things that are for the far future, related with health and related maybe cosmetics, because you are dealing directly with the human body, so you have a tough regulation to demonstrate that your product is okay, so that will take longer time. Maybe in the middle, there will find some industries that will use blue tech solutions, like inks for specific purpose that are biodegradable, and other industries, like for instance, a lot of products that you use in our daily lives go directly to the waters, and at the end, eventually it goes to the ocean. So if we can find some blue biotech solutions to put in the products that go again to the oceans, then sustainability cycle will be better. As these industries have less regulation than the industries related with health, maybe this will go slower than the feed food and pet food, but faster than cosmetics and health, blue biotech.
We can start back with James first.
Sure. I think of algae producers as facing some of the classic challenges of a platform technology company. It means that you have different opportunities to take your technology and deploy them into end markets that may be related or that may be quite different. So I think from a vision perspective for where Sapphire should be in 5 years, it's deploying the technology into 2 to 3 separate markets with different products, because that's the way that you make the economics of a platform technology company viable. If you're trying to target one market, then you're kind of rolling up the carpet behind you as you walk down the path, if that's a reasonable analogy. You're saying that we've developed some technology, but we're not going to continue to churn new products out of the engine. For Sapphire, I think we are an algae development engine. And that may mean we target more than one market, and if we're talking about a horizon like 5 years, we should. And we should come up with solutions for more than one market. Which market we start with will come down to those questions about technical development of products around the needs for individual customers and the economics of satisfying those needs. But over a time horizon, as a technology platform, ideally, it's applicable in more than one end industry. And launching those products, I think, is the goal for a company like Sapphire.
You're not going to tell me which products those are going to be, no?
No.
I had to ask for the second time.
For Gen 3 Bio, actually, I would mirror what Jamie has mentioned for Sapphire Energy. We're going to continue to work on additional new development platforms. We're going to, in 5 years, I would hope that we have commercial products in 2 or 3 different markets. But additionally, I would also envision us having partner suppliers, partner development partners, and also partner customers. And in essence, build a consortium of companies that are working together, that are not competitors, but actually all have different focuses, but can work together to move things faster through the industry and into the market.
Nuno?
This is very easy because James has gone. So the only partner I had in the table that was producing algae with me is no longer here. So
You're going to tell me the products then?
Just joking. 2 or 3 important things. First thing, dream big. Who would have imagined 5 years ago that we would be able to put in place and commission and having here the largest unit in the world on photobioreactors on algae in Portugal? So this is a mainstream for us. I mean, we had to dream big since the beginning. So my answer to you is obviously conditioned by dreaming big. As a CEO of the company, though, I have to have my feet on the ground, because otherwise the company will not be a company anymore nowadays. So I'll try to balance both of these things. We look at this unit that we have here in Portugal, although being a very big unit, we look at it as a small unit compared of what we'll be having in 5 years' time. We think this is a small piece of a much, much larger unit that we'll be able to deploy in 5 years' time. We have to be able to produce algae at a lower price, and for that, we will have to have much, much bigger units. We have the technology. We are hoping that it will be possible to do. I don't think we will be doing this in Portugal, but we'll be doing elsewhere in the world. So much bigger units, much lower production costs. This will allow us to go and to be competitive in many other markets. Everybody's talking about the feed market, namely for aquaculture. But I think we'll go into things that have not been so much spoken about, like the bioplastics, obviously. And maybe not in 5 years, but we'll get to the energy market. We have many, many research and development projects on energy, and there are very nice and huge things that are happening on the energy side. So scale is the problem. We have to develop technology and be able to put in place such big units to produce algae that the price would come low to go to the other markets.
Okay, Jen, I think just to wrap up, another general question for all of you. What would you say is the biggest weakness and the biggest strength of this industry?
Well, in a way, I think I already comment on that. I think that the biggest strength is really the direction that the world is leading to. At the same time, I think that the most difficult part here as well, this is a very complex products, complex processes, complex industry. As James said, and he left already, I totally agree that this is an area where you need to cooperate much more than in other industries and in other sectors of the economy. Because you cannot do something from A to Z here on your own. You really need partners. So this is something that creates a difficulty because we are still very much based on a culture of competition and secret, and this is somehow difficult. So I would think that this is an economic sector that will force us also to change our mindset, and of course these cultural changes are always harder to achieve.
Sorry.
Okay.
Back to you again.
But, do you want me to talk? Okay. Just for you to have an idea, we don't know exactly how many different species of algae we have on Earth. So the potential, again, is absolutely huge. Huge. We are talking about 10 different, 20 different species. I think we have some knowledge about a few thousands of species, but there might be 100,000 different species of algae, or 300,000 different species. So the potential for us is algae as itself, and the potential is huge. Threatening, I think we have to find a way to deploy technology, and funding that technology development is an issue that we have to look at very carefully, just because of what I said previously. If you raise money from the wrong hands, that will kill you, and you might be just at the edge of deploying that technology. So money is absolutely necessary for that, but it's not easy to get there and to be able to deploy technology with the investments that will be needed in the future.
Well, I would say that the strongest point of Blue Biotech is that I truly believe, based on facts, that is an answer for us to live more sustainably. And this is a thing that can be a big transformation on how we live. So, and this, in my view, is a thing of generations, is a thing that we are doing for not only us in the present, but also for our sons and the others that will come. This is the main point, and this is very important. It is why I'm stressing it, because in my main concern is actually some short vision of leaders, because you know all these people, all these companies are doing their best. So if they are helped for a more coherent and cooperative vision of our leaders and less rhetoric, I think we will find a solution to foster this industry with some gains for everyone.
And I think what I would do is my summary would be that some of the things that we've heard previously from the other three, diversity is the weakness of this blue biotech industry. The diversity of the number of different types of algae and the strains, the types of companies, and the different types of operations that exist. But in a lot of ways, the diversity is also the strength of this industry, because all those different players can come together and work together in a non-competitive fashion, where they're not competitors, I should say, to be able to move the industry faster. And so in some ways, each of the expertise of the different companies can help to grow the industry faster, and that diversity will help the industry too.
Thank you.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I can't resist. My kids like spinach.
Mine don't, so thank you.
Can I just say something also? I think that very, very soon I'll be without the mic, so it's my last chance. I have attended hundreds of conferences all over the world. This is my first time at BioMarine, and I would personally like to thank Véronique and Pierre for their personal effort, and I think this is the difference. They are here presently themselves, and this is huge work, but the extraordinary result is, in my opinion, because they are present here, and it's because of their personal effort, and I would like to thank them both very much. Excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you all, and I think that is it. No more, no, one more comment? No? Okay. Thank you all.